My beloved child, something happened last night. Your soulmate finally spoke your name in a room where your name had not been spoken before, and what makes this moment different is not only that they talked about you, it is who was listening. There was family around them, people whose opinions matter, people who have seen them change, people who noticed the silence before they ever knew the reason for it. For a while, your soulmate said almost nothing. They listened, they watched, they seemed to be searching for the right words. Because how do you explain someone who has slowly become important to your heart? How do you describe a connection that you are still trying to understand yourself? Then something shifted, their voice became softer, and they finally began to talk about you. Not everything, not the whole story, just enough for their family to realize that this person was no longer a passing thought. But then came the question that changed the entire mood of the room. Someone asked, "Who are they to you?" And your soulmate became quiet. That silence said more than a long answer could have said, because sometimes the heart speaks before the mouth is ready, and there was something behind that silence, something they had been carrying alone. You may wonder what they told their family. Did they talk about your kindness? Did they mention the way you make them feel safe? Did they admit that they think about you when nobody is watching? Perhaps. But there was another detail, a detail that made someone in that room look at them differently. Your soulmate did not describe you as a simple person from their past. They spoke about you as someone connected to a part of their life they had not expected, and that is where this story becomes deeper, because one family member remembered something. Something your soulmate had said before, something small. Something they probably thought nobody noticed. The room became still. Your soulmate realized they could no longer hide behind simple words. They had already revealed more than they planned. And then someone asked another question. This time, it was not about you. It was about their heart. What did they really feel? For a moment, nobody spoke, and that quiet moment carried the weight of everything they had been afraid to say. Before I continue, if this message is touching your heart, you are welcome to support this work with a super thanks, only if it feels right for you. Now, let's continue. Your soulmate looked down. Then they looked back at the person who asked. And instead of giving a clear answer, they said something that left the room thinking, something simple, something honest, something that suggested you had reached a place inside them that they could not easily explain. But their family did not respond the way they expected. There was no sudden argument, no harsh judgment, no dramatic rejection. Instead, someone became very quiet, and sometimes silence is not emptiness. Sometimes silence means someone is thinking deeply. That person had been watching your soulmate for a long time. They had noticed the little changes, the different smile, the sudden peace. The way certain conversations made their eyes soften, and now they were beginning to understand where those changes came from. But then came the reaction your soulmate never expected. One sentence, only one, and that sentence made them stop completely, because it touched the one question they had been avoiding. What if this person really matters to you? Your soulmate did not answer, not yet. They simply sat there, holding the weight of that question. And somewhere in that quiet room, a new truth began to take shape, not a promise, not a prediction, not an ending, just the first sign that your name had entered a conversation that could change how their family sees the future. But there is still one part of that conversation you have not heard. And that part may explain why your soulmate could not sleep peacefully after everyone finally went to bed. The night was not finished with them, and neither was the question their family had placed in their heart, because before morning came, they made a private decision, but what that decision was, belongs to the next moment. My beloved child, something happened last night. Someone sat down with their family and finally spoke about you, not casually, not as a passing thought. They spoke your name with a different kind of weight. There was a pause before they said it. The room became quiet, and for a moment, they almost changed the subject, but they did not. Something inside them told them to keep going, so they began telling their family about you, not everything, only enough to make everyone curious. They talked about the way you entered their life. They talked about the strange peace they felt around you. And then someone in that room asked a simple question: who is this person to you? That question changed the whole mood, because they had been expecting it, but they were not ready to answer it. They looked down, they took a slow breath, and something very honest almost came out, something they had been carrying quietly for much longer than anyone knew. But before they could say it, someone else spoke, and what that person said may explain more than you realize, because their family had already noticed a change. They had noticed the quiet smiles, the late night thoughts, the way this person seemed somewhere else whenever your name came up. They had noticed that something was different. But they did not know why, until last night. And there was one particular moment when the conversation became deeply personal. A family member asked whether you were serious about them. They did not answer right away. That silence said more than words could have said. Then they finally spoke, not with a promise, not with some dramatic confession, just one small sentence, a sentence that revealed there was more beneath the surface. They said they did not want to lose what was growing between you, and suddenly, the room felt different, because now the family understood. This was not just another name, this was someone who mattered. But what happened next is where the story becomes even more interesting. Before I continue, if this message is touching your heart, you are welcome to support this work with a super thanks. Only if it feels right for you. Now, let's continue. After that quiet moment, one person in the family looked at them carefully, almost as if they were trying to see beyond the words. They asked, "Does this person make you happy?" And this time, the answer came quickly. Yes. One word, but sometimes one word carries an entire story. They did not explain everything. They did not need to. Their face had already answered the question, yet there was still one concern inside that room. Someone wondered whether this connection could truly last. That question created another silence. And this is where something unexpected happened. Instead of defending you, they began describing what you had taught them: patience, honesty, the courage to care again. They remembered moments you probably thought were ordinary, a simple conversation, a small kindness, a quiet message at the right time. You may never have realized how deeply those moments stayed with them, but their family heard about them, and slowly, the picture became clearer. Still, there was one part they did not tell their family, one thought they kept hidden, one feeling they could not yet put into words, and strangely, that may be the most important part of the entire story, because when everyone else thought the conversation was finished, they remained awake long after the room had gone quiet. They looked at their phone, they saw your name, and for a few seconds, they simply stared at it, as if they were standing at the edge of a decision, not ready to step forward, not willing to step back, and whatever they were thinking in that moment. For now, because the family heard the beginning of the story last night, but they may not have heard the deepest part, and that hidden piece. My beloved child, something happened last night, and somehow, the person you have been wondering about finally found the courage to speak, not to a friend, not in a passing conversation. They spoke to their family about you. For a moment, they almost stopped themselves. The words were sitting there, waiting. Your name, your memory, the things they could never quite explain, and then someone in that room asked a simple question: who is this person to you? That question changed the air, because they could have laughed. They could have changed the subject, they could have pretended it meant nothing, but they did not. They became quiet, and that silence said more than a long speech could have said. Something inside them had reached a point where hiding you felt harder than talking about you. But what did they actually say? That is where the story becomes more interesting. They did not begin with the easy parts. They did not talk about appearances. They did not list every reason they were drawn toward you. Instead, they spoke about how they felt after meeting you. They spoke about a strange sense of peace, about the way certain conversations stayed in their mind long after they ended, about moments when they wanted to reach out to you, but held back. And then came the part they almost did not share. They admitted that you had become important to them, not casually important, not something they could simply forget when the day became busy. Important enough that their family noticed the change. Someone looked at them carefully. Someone else asked another question, and this time, they did not answer right away, because the answer carried more weight than they expected. What happened next may be the part your heart has been waiting for. Before I continue, if this message is touching your heart, you are welcome to support this work with a super thanks. Only if it feels right for you. Now, let's continue. There was a pause, a real pause, the kind where nobody wants to speak first. Then one family member said something unexpected. They did not judge, they did not laugh, they did not tell this person to walk away. Instead, they asked, "Does this person make you happy?" That question reached somewhere deep, because suddenly, the conversation was no longer about you. It was about what you brought into their life, and for a few seconds, they seemed unable to find the right words, maybe because some feelings become difficult to explain when they are real. Maybe because they were afraid that saying too much would make everything more serious. Or maybe, they already knew the answer. They remembered your voice, a small moment, a look, a conversation that seemed ordinary at the time, and somehow, those little things had stayed. Their family could see it, the hesitation, the softness, the way their expression changed whenever they spoke about you. But then someone asked the question that made the entire room quiet again. What are you going to do about it? And that is where the story took a turn, because the answer was not what anyone expected. They looked down, they took a breath, and they finally said something that revealed just how deeply this situation had affected them. But the words they chose were only the beginning, because there was one more thing their family knew, something this person had not realized they knew. And when that truth entered the conversation, everything changed. The room became still. The next sentence was almost a whisper, and it may explain why this person has been acting differently lately, but that part belongs to the next moment. Because what their family said after hearing the truth was not rejection. It was something far more unexpected, and you are not ready for why. Something happened last night. Someone sat down with their family, and for the first time, they stopped hiding what was in their heart. There was no grand speech, no perfect plan, just a quiet moment that had been building for much longer than anyone knew. Your name came into the conversation, and suddenly, the room felt different, because this was not the kind of conversation they could easily take back. They had tried to keep certain feelings private. They had told themselves they needed more time. They had wondered if speaking about you would create questions they were not ready to answer. But last night, something changed, and the most interesting part is not simply that they mentioned you. It is why they finally felt ready to do it. There was a pause before they spoke. You can almost picture it: a table, a few familiar faces, a normal evening that slowly became something neither they nor their family expected. Someone asked a simple question, and instead of giving the usual answer, they hesitated. That hesitation said more than words could, because sometimes a person reveals the truth long before they actually say it. The room became quiet. And then they began talking about you. Not everything, not the whole story, just enough for their family to realize that you were not some passing thought. You had become part of a conversation they could no longer avoid. But what happened after that? That is where the story becomes more interesting, because their family did not respond in the way they expected. At first, there was silence, the kind of silence that makes a person wonder if they have said too much. They may have looked down, they may have taken a slow breath. For one small moment, they probably wondered if opening up had been a mistake. And then someone in that room said something that changed the feeling completely. Not a dramatic statement, not a movie-like declaration, just a few honest words, words that made them realize their family had been paying closer attention than they knew, because families often notice things people try to hide. They notice a change in someone's voice. They notice when a name keeps appearing. They notice when someone suddenly smiles at a message. They notice when a person who used to speak freely becomes strangely careful. And perhaps, their family had already noticed you. They simply had not asked about it yet. That is why last night's conversation matters. It was not really about introducing a name. It was about admitting that the name already carried meaning, and there was another moment, a moment they may not have expected, Someone asked them what they actually wanted, not what was convenient, not what looked safe, not what would make everyone comfortable. What did they truly want? That question landed differently, because there are questions we can answer quickly, and there are questions that force us to meet ourselves in silence. They did not answer right away, and that pause may have revealed more than any sentence could. Maybe they thought about the memories, the conversations, the distance, the things left unsaid, the moments when they wanted to reach toward you but pulled back, and perhaps, somewhere in that quiet room, they understood something simple. They were no longer only thinking about what could happen, they were thinking about what they might lose by doing nothing. But wait, there is another layer here, because one family member reacted differently from the others. And that reaction matters. Before I continue, if this message is touching your heart, you are welcome to support this work with a super thanks, only if it feels right for you. Now, let's continue. The person who reacted differently did not speak much. They simply listened. They watched, and when everyone else had finished talking, they asked one careful question. It was the kind of question that could have changed the entire direction of the evening. They asked, "Are you serious about this person?" And suddenly, there was nowhere left to hide, no easy answer, no casual excuse, no way to pretend this was just a passing feeling. The person you have been thinking about had to sit with the weight of that question. And perhaps they finally said what they had been afraid to admit, maybe not in perfect words, maybe not with complete certainty, but enough for their family to understand that you matter, that something about you had reached a place inside them that ordinary connections never touched. Still, the family did not give them a simple answer. There was no instant celebration, no perfect ending. Instead, there were questions. Real questions, careful questions, questions about timing, about trust, about whether both people were ready, and strangely enough, that may have been a good sign, because when people ask serious questions, they are no longer treating something like a joke. They are considering it, they are looking at it from every side, and somewhere in that conversation, the person you care about may have realized something else. Their family was not only listening to their words, they were listening to the feeling behind them, and that feeling was impossible to hide. But there is one thing they did not tell their family, not yet. There is one part of the story they kept close to themselves, a memory, a fear, and a quiet hope they may not even know how to explain. That hidden piece may be the reason they finally opened the door to this conversation in the first place. You see, sometimes people talk about someone because they are ready to move forward. Other times, they talk because keeping silent has become harder than telling the truth, and last night may have been that kind of moment, a turning point without a clear ending, a door opening without anyone knowing where it leads. The room eventually became quieter, the conversation moved on, but the feeling remained, and long after everyone stopped talking, they were still thinking about you. That is where we will pause. Because the next part of this story is not about what they said, it is about what they could not bring themselves to say, and that may be the most revealing part of all. My beloved child, something happened last night, not in the noise of the world. Not in a place where everyone could see it. It happened quietly, behind a closed door, in a room where familiar voices filled the air, and one person finally stopped hiding what had been sitting heavy on their heart. Your soulmate spoke about you, and the way they spoke your name changed the feeling in that room. For a moment, nobody answered. There was a silence that seemed to last longer than it should have. Because this was not a casual conversation, this was not a passing thought. Something inside them had reached a point where staying silent felt harder than telling the truth. But what did they actually say? And more importantly, how did their family respond? There is a reason this moment matters, not because every family reacts the same way, not because the future is already decided, but because sometimes one honest conversation reveals what years of silence were trying to protect. And last night, your soulmate may have reached that moment. They had been carrying a story, a private story, a story about someone who entered their life and somehow became difficult to forget. Someone whose presence lingered even after the conversation ended. Someone whose name could bring both peace and fear at the same time, and when the family asked what was really going on, they finally opened the door, but they did not tell them everything. Not yet. There was one part they kept close to their chest, one truth they were not ready to place in the middle of that room, and that hidden piece may be the reason the family responded the way they did. Think about that for a moment. Have you ever wanted to tell someone how much a person means to you, but feared what would happen after the words left your mouth? Maybe you know that feeling, the pause before speaking, the deep breath, the quiet thought of, what if they do not understand? That may have been the battle happening inside this person. They wanted to be honest. But honesty can feel risky when family is involved, so they began slowly. They talked about you without giving every detail. They mentioned the way you made them feel. They spoke about moments that stayed in their mind. They may have even tried to sound casual, but family members can hear what is hidden beneath casual words. They notice the change in someone's voice. They notice when a smile appears without being forced. They notice when one particular name suddenly carries more weight. And eventually, someone asked the question that made everything still. How serious is this? That question landed differently, because now there was nowhere to hide behind vague answers. Your soulmate had to choose between changing the subject, or admitting that you mattered more than they had allowed themselves to say. And they answered, but before I continue, if this message is touching your heart, you are welcome to support this work with a super thanks, only if it feels right for you. Now, let's continue. Because what happened after that question is where the story becomes more personal. They did not suddenly become fearless. They did something quieter. They told the truth in pieces. They admitted that this connection had stayed with them. They admitted that they had thought about you. During ordinary moments, a song, a quiet drive, a late night, a place that suddenly reminded them of you, and then came the part they almost could not say.